to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Hey, this is James O'Neill. Russian Lieutenant General Vanil Sarvarov, a senior military figure and former commander in Syria, was killed Monday morning in Moscow when an explosive device detonated under his car. Investigators are treating the case as murder committed in a socially dangerous manner and are examining potential involvement by Ukrainian military intelligence, whose operatives have carried out multiple assassinations using car bombs and targeted shootings. Sarvarov's name appeared on Ukraine's Mirat Vorets list, labeling him a Russian war criminal, and the site has already marked him liquidated. He's among the most senior Russian officers killed during the war. The attack follows a pattern of Ukrainian operations targeting Russian commanders, collaborators, and officials across Russia and occupied territories. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff described peace talks in Miami with Russian negotiator Kirill Dmitriev as productive and constructive, signaling momentum behind President Trump's Ukraine peace plan. Dmitriev met with Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and White House official Josh Grunbaum, with both sides affirming commitment to advancing a settlement. Parallel meetings also took place with the Ukrainian delegation and U.S. and EU officials, focusing on a revised 20-point framework, security guarantees, and long-term reconstruction planning. The Kremlin said Dmitriev will brief President Putin, who remains skeptical of Kiev's proposals and intends to adhere to understandings reached with Trump during their Alaska summit in August. Dmitriev signaled future talks by posting "Next Time Moscow." A survey by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism shows 61% of British Jews are considering leaving the UK, up from 50% last year, amid rising anti-Semitism. Over half say they no longer see a long-term future in the country, and 45% feel unwelcome. The poll follows the Yom Kippur terror attack in Manchester, where Syrian migrant Jihad al-Shami killed 2 people and injured 4 before being shot by police. An associate has since been charged with terror offenses. Police now say they will arrest those publicly chanting "Globalize the Intifada." Critics accuse authorities of years of weak enforcement against extremist rhetoric. The UK government pledges increased security funding and further action. Over 800 illegal boat migrants crossed the English Channel into Britain on Saturday, the highest December total since crossings began surging in 2018. Combined with last weekend's arrivals, annual crossings now total 41,455, surpassing 2024's figure and approaching 2022's record 45,755. The renewed surge underscores Prime Minister Keir Starmer's struggles to curb migration despite a one-in, one-out deal with France, which has returned only 153 people and has even seen some migrants re-enter the UK after removal. Critics, including Nigel Farage, call Starmer's approach ineffective. Farage secured French national rally support for allowing British pushbacks if their party comes to power. The UK Home Office called the numbers shameful. French President Emmanuel Macron has ordered construction of a next-generation nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to replace the Charles de Gaulle, which entered service in 2001. The decision follows a year of pressure from President Trump for Europe to assume greater responsibility for its own defense. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production, suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share the results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Their job is to serve us. They promise them gone, but their promises crumble with every dollar spun, and still they come with their papers, and their poisons lands are sprayed from the air. They think the forests don't feel the pain. This soil remembers every footprint and broken hearts. Stay away from my land, my children, my home. This ground is sacred. We stand here as one. No suits, no papers, no bureaucrat on a phone. We've drawn the line in the sand. Cross it once and you'll understand. Justice will prevail in this land.
Makers are facing more trouble.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, the world today.
Hey there, I'm Lance Bass, and this is CHIP. For more than 100 years, American Humane has been on the front lines protecting animals in times of crisis. From Pearl Harbor to 9/11, the California wildfires, and the coronavirus pandemic, American Humane Rescue has provided life-saving assistance for animals in virtually every major national disaster. If you're anything like me, your pets mean the world to you. And if disaster strikes, you want to keep them safe. To prepare for an oncoming disaster, ensure your pet has secure and up-to-date identification. And if you must evacuate, remember to take your disaster preparedness kit with you. To learn more about disaster planning and how to keep your best friends safe, please visit AmericanHumane.org.
G'day, Troy Casadale here. I've been travelling around this country playing music for more years than I'd like to remember. I've spent a lot of time on stage, but I reckon I've spent more time on the roads getting to gigs. And honestly, I've seen worse behaviour on the roads than I've seen at any concert of mine, and often from people who have years of experience behind the wheel. It's probably been a while since a lot of us have really thought about our driving, so take a sec and think about what you can do to help keep yourself and others safe on the roads. Us mob are almost 3 times more likely to die in a road crash than the rest of the population. So let's change that. Drive safely. Don't get distracted by the phone or others in the car, or get hot-headed or any of that stuff. You wouldn't do inconsiderate things outside a car, so why do them in one? Don't let a car change who you are. Safer driving starts with you.
Telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, the world today.
To the big issue. Nice to have your company. 2 more sleeps and then it's the turkey time. Well, fish or ham, or maybe ham, maybe a pie of some sort, but a great time to be with your family. And it's what, I suppose, what it's all about, isn't it? Okay, we're looking at, again, we're revisiting the fire ant eradication. This time, who's counting the cost? Now, we've seen this before, overzealous government officials trampling the rights of citizens to achieve what might appear on the surface to be a laudable public policy objective, but which on a closer examination is ultimately impossible and even incredibly harmful. Think COVID-19, think net zero, if you must, think renewable energy, and now you can add to the list, the National Fire Ant Eradication Program. Individuals and scientific experts questioning the objective and high cost of this program have been bullied, arrested, or declared conspiracy theorist. Some have been broken and communities have been divided. And again, mainstream media, including notably the ABC, have been willingly engaged in this demonisation without asking the obvious questions. Why and who benefits? Our panellists today have first-hand experience of a crazy national program funded by taxpayers. They are part of a growing group of people with legitimate questions and, more importantly, offer a way forward. Government, of course, isn't listening. Our guest today, well, we haven't got them there. Isn't that incredible? So what we do is just go back to this one and all sorts of things happening at the moment. Our guest today are Dr. Connie Turney, Senior Scientist and Microbiologist, and Sarah McGuire, Fire and Treatment Alternatives. We'll come back to our guest in just 1 second.
Their job is to serve us. They promise them gone, but their promises crumble with every dollar spun, and still they come with their papers, and their poisons lands are sprayed from the air. They think the forests don't feel the pain. This soil remembers every footprint and broken hearts. Stay away from my land, my children, my home. This ground is sacred. We stand here as one. No suits, no papers, no bureaucrat on a phone. We've drawn the line in the sand. Cross it once and you'll understand. Justice will prevail in this land.
It's a great track there too, and I hope it brings some sort of it makes people aware of how crazy our government is at the moment. Dr. Connie Turney, a Senior Scientist and Microbiologist, and Sarah McGuire, Fire and Treatment Alternatives. Connie, tell us, just give us an overview of where we're at the moment with this madness.
Where science is totally ignored. I mean, they're telling us we can still eradicate, it's all safe, other animals won't eat it, it won't affect other animals. And all of that is a total lie. They told us that it doesn't affect vertebrates. It does. The studies show us that it does. They say that it doesn't stay in the ground very long. Studies showed us that it stays in full sunlight for 8.5 days. And the study only went to 8.5 days. They say it doesn't affect other ant species. Well, there were studies out that it does. The minister himself says that they mismanaged the program and actually spread the fire ants. And when you spray against fire ants, when there's no fire ants, other species will take up the bait. And you're actually doing tremendous harm. You're actually helping to spread the fire ants because they don't have any predators anymore. They don't have any competitors anymore because other ant species are competitors. So they are the first one to invade again. And so they have actually spread them. You have to remember that in 2001, they discovered 470 nests in Brisbane after they've been there. The figures vary a bit, 15 to 20 years already. They discovered them. Now we're at 15,000 and more nests and over an area of 850,000 hectares. That is larger than some countries in the world. And they say, oh, the species will come back. From where? When you eradicate 850,000 hectares, from where are they going to come back? So it's just, there's no sense to it. They have a permit. It's a minor use permit. So I have inquired why minor use. I mean, this is a large area. Because apparently they're not making any profit, and therefore it is a minor use one. And if you, and they promise that they still can eradicate. Now you listen to an expert from the United America, and they tell you no, they won't. Nobody has ever eradicated fire ants over such a huge area. It's just not possible. It's way beyond that. If they're in a small area, that would be possible. But I mean, they couldn't even do this in a small area where they first discovered them. And they're they had some studies done, an expert already in these studies said in, I think it was 2021, it's not possible anymore. So it's not possible. They're actually spreading the fire ants, and they're doing tremendous damage to all the other species. And that is vertebrates included, not just invertebrates, because they're growth regulators, and they also affect vertebrates. And so when they came to our place without actually notifying us and without telling us what they're actually spraying, after the spraying, we had a lot of green frogs on our place. They all vanished. We haven't seen a green frog for a long time, and that was in 2022. And frogs, when you start killing frogs, you know your environment is poisoned. And they keep on persisting. Oh, it's not affecting other species. It's not bioaccumulative. And the literature says exactly the opposite. So, yeah, it's just madness. They're not listening to science.
It's actually very disturbing, but there are alternatives. Before we get into those, Sarah McGuire, how did we get to this point of insanity?
I have no idea. I mean, this all started for me back in March 2024 when I got a brochure in my mailbox saying we're coming onto your property and we're going to treat your property for fire ants, even though there's not even any fire ants in my entire suburb. And they just sort of said, we don't need your permission. And I just saw red when I saw that line saying we don't need your permission to poison your property. I just thought, come on, this can't be true. So I started researching. I contacted the Greens to say, what do you think of this? What do you think about all these poisons being put everywhere? They didn't care. They support it. And all that people kept saying to me is, we're eradicating fire ants. And I'm just like, but I'm looking at the data and the finances. You've spent $1.2 billion in 24 years, and these ants are 20 times worse. So where is this eradication happening? So I don't know. I pulled together a group of people in Samford to sort of have meetings where I live, and we came up with this whole idea of fire ant treatment alternatives. There are suburbs where they do have fire ants that they want help. So I'm like, let's look at safer alternatives. But you can't poison hundreds of thousands of hectares without any collateral damage, which is what Connie has talked about. But just in Samford, for example, the helicopters came at the end of May. We're quite a tight-knit community, very organic lifestyle here. Some locals said, we found this bait in the creeks. And I'm like, wow, let's go there and get samples. So a few of us went and got samples from the creek. Another lady caught them putting it in the South Pine River. We went there. The baits were all in the South Pine River. So we got samples from there. We sent them off for testing, and it came back with significant pollution of both the South Pine River and Dawson Creek, which was the first creek they found it in. And we had independent water tests done. We spent thousands of dollars getting those results, and they put pyriproxyfen, which is highly toxic to all aquatic life, should never be put into water. And so then a few days later, we had a meeting. The program actually came to our community and did a big meeting. And they stood there and said, we're sorry, Samford, we accidentally baited one of your creeks. The helicopter pilot didn't realize there was running water there. And I sort of called out, well, what about the South Pine River? You must have known that was there. That's the main river that goes through Samford. And anyway, it took them almost a year to conclude they had breached Environmental Protection Act. They had made errors. They then changed their policy and said, oh, well, we won't use that chemical anymore. But they're still using another one that's just as toxic. And yeah, they got fined the equivalent of $20,000, but they didn't even have to pay the fine. They just said, oh, well, because we're another government department and it's not in the public interest to be fined that, we'll just run a study on native ants, which is something I've been saying, you should have done that, 20 years ago, not now, retrospectively. And the one thing we found is there's no environmental risk assessment for this entire program, not one shred of evidence that shows that poisoning 850,000 hectares isn't going to cause more harm than good.
Yeah, it's a bit like you know, and I go right back with the historical battles in Vietnam, where they wiped out an entire village to save the village. It's very much like that, isn't it? They're going to wipe out the environment, you know, not as great, but getting close to it, to save the environment, and it doesn't make any sense. Can you tell me, Connie, the fire ant threat? You know, terrible things. I'm actually picturing the next Alien movie to feature a fire ant, but a very, very big one. But James Cameron, eat your heart out. But I'm just thinking though, what's the threat of a fire ant compared to other ants? And by the way, we have black ants. They're terrible things. They bite. But
Oh
yeah,
yes, and we have green ants. We have ants that sting much more. My husband and me actually discovered a nest, not in our place, and my husband put his hand in just to see how much it sting, and he said it's nothing compared to some of the other ant species. So there's this, basically this, we're gonna, the kids fall in and they're gonna be, totally stung and die, and it's not true. I mean, if you fall into an ant nest, yes, they will sting you, but I mean, people don't fall into ant nests normally. They get sometimes stung, but then you just go away from it, and the animals seem to be living with it. I mean, it's in America. It's in Florida. They couldn't control them, so they're all over, and the people just live with them, and it seems to be fine. So it's a panic. They're creating panic. I mean, we live with them now for 20 years. They've been in masses in our area, and there's no people dying from it. It doesn't seem to be that much of a problem. And then they say, oh, they will kill our birds in the trees. In Australia, they don't even go up the trees. So it's really they're exaggerating it tremendously, so they can keep on doing their project, or their program. But they're not listening to the science. They're not listening to where fire ants are not, and still spraying on there. And in America, the recommendation is, if there's no fire ants, do not spray, because you will just spread them instead of controlling them. You should only spray, or not even spray, but you should control them in areas where they are, and that's it, and not outside that. And they are already up. We're up in a mine, in a Bowen Basin, up in the mine, and they said they controlled them, and it comes out now that they haven't controlled them. And this is a very small area. It's in a mine site. And they haven't controlled them there. They're saying they probably need to have months and months to trying to control them. And this is one site. So how are you going to do this in 850,000 hectares? It's just impossible. And they're doing more damage. And the problem is they're doing damage, but they're not even evaluating what they're doing. So we don't know the damage. And because it's also bioaccumulative, we won't know what's happening till years after, and then it's too late. So it's a really environmental disaster they're causing with trying to kill the fire ants. I'm not against trying to control fire ants. We're not against that. There are alternatives you can do, and you can control them. We won't be able to eradicate them probably because it's too late now. We spread them far too wide, but we can control them. But what we're doing at the moment is not controlling them, but harming all the environment.
We interviewed Trevor Holt, and a pretty decent bloke, if I have to say so myself. And we were talking about the alternatives, and one which I thought was absolutely fantastic, Sarah, was the hot water, 90 degrees Celsius. You have a machine that goes really deep. You fire away and knocks them on the head. You go back a few days later, if they're around, and do it again. All gone. The only damage is to the fire ant and to the rest of the environment. It seems to be pretty hunky-dory, to say the least. What other alternatives are there, and why are we going down that path for these chemicals that just destroy?
Well, it comes back to the money. I'm actually a chartered accountant, so one of the things I did in the beginning of this was to research how much is money's being spent, where's the funding coming from, how is it being used, and obviously the chemical companies are being making a lot of money from this. Another company is McDermott's, the helicopter company that spreads the baits aerially. They're making, they've got contracts for this. I then found out that the funding only gets provided if they call it an eradication program. So there's an incentive to keep running a very ineffective eradication program, because the 90% of that $1.2 billion of funding has come from the Commonwealth. So Queensland only pays 10% of that funding, but they get all that money to run a program, which essentially is become a jobs program. It's all about just funding hundreds and hundreds of these workers to distribute bait, and so they won't get that funding if they say, sorry, we've lost the fight here, eradication is no longer possible. So all that funding gets stripped. So it is all about the money, and it's a complete rort. But going back to why are fire ants so scary? They because they want everybody to want to be part of this program, whereas people aren't realizing there has been tropical fire ants in Australia for 200 years. They came from South America. They're the same type of ant, they've got the same type of venom, they've got the same sting, they have the same sort of colonies, and they spread. They've been in Australia for 200 years. So if there's a problem with fire ants affecting Australia, why are these tropical fire ants being treated differently to red imported fire ants, which are essentially the same type of ant? So people don't even realize that they're not doing an eradication program for the tropical fire ant, because they've been here for 200 years. There's loads of them in the Northern Territory, and they've just found them again in Brisbane, I think, which they'd originally said they'd eradicated them from Brisbane, but they why is it treated so differently? And again, I believe it's all about the money. But also fire ants, when you compare their stings to green ants, wasps, they're very low on the pain scale. And the film that you were showing the trailer for goes into all those details. And something I looked at is, if these fire ants are so deadly, where are all the people that have died from them in Australia? Not one person has died from fire ant bites in Australia in the 24 years they've been here. In America, fire ants have been there for 100 years. They say that 85 people to date have so-called died, but only 30 so of those cases were verified as fire ant stings. You've got more chance of being struck by lightning. And secondly, 72 people on average a year in America, the CDC says, dies from bee stings. So the chances of dying from a fire ant bite is really, really low. And if you compare them to jack jumping ants and bull ants, they are way worse and deadly. And there has been deaths in Australia from those ants. But the whole thing's just been hyped up to create a fear campaign, to keep this continual funding coming into Queensland, and to just keep running this as a jobs program, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you. I think the people benefiting from this are not the farmers or those on the land. Can I ask you, Connie, to tell us about the bait and the chemicals that they use, and what it does to the surrounding environment?
Well, they are called growth regulators. It's S-mesoprene and pyriproxyfen. And in insect, they basically disrupt the stage from when they're just growing, and then going into the larvae, into the pupae stage. They disrupt that, because normally the growth regulators won't be produced as much when they're going to the pupae stage and turning into an adult. And the growth regulator basically keeps that going, and then they can't develop into an adult, and eventually the queen will die because she doesn't get fed anymore. There's not enough ants around. In vertebrates, it interferes with the growth hormone, the retinoid acid receptors regulate genes at a certain interval, and that is during the growth stage, the development stage, and they interfere with that. So we see, for example, frogs that have underdeveloped legs, and so it interferes with their development, and that is vertebrae overall. And so basically what you're doing, you're having this growth promoter, which is also accumulative. And so they did studies and fed it to cows and had a look at chicken eggs, and it comes out into the eggs, it comes out into the milk. And when you have it in the environment, it also in water, it lasts longer in water. And that is the stage where, for example, our frogs develop in. Now, we have talked before about the creek, a flowing creek being contaminated with just spraying once. Now, what happens to little puddles where the animals drink from, the birds drink from? So then they don't have to actually eat that. They just have to have drinking water that's contaminated on a regular basis, and it will affect the birds. So we have seen some birds here that they just sit there, they won't fly away, and so they are very prone to predation. It affects, so, and then it's not only the growth regulator itself. When it degrades, it goes into metabolites that are actually more toxic than the product itself. And so these metabolites affect the enzymes in the soil, they affect the earthworms. So we have the water. In water, they're very toxic, as we said before, to the animals in the water. They're in the soil, they destroy the soil, they kill ants. Ants are very important for germination of plants. They air the soil. So the soil gets affected by all this as well. And then, of course, it goes up the food chain. So the animals that eat these animals that have taken up, it will go up the food chain, and eventually you will see they will have, because it's bioaccumulative, they will have a high enough level that they get also affected. So, and the problem with that is normally you spray a toxin and everything dies, and you can see that straight away. But here we can't, because it's accumulative, and it will take a while for this all to come through and to see the real outcome of what we have done over these years.
Yeah, it's horrific to say the least. Sarah, the evidence of harm, death of pets, wildlife, threats to organic farmers. Why would you ever become a farmer? What's left? It must be very, very, I mean, especially to your community, it must be soul destroying that you see Big Brother coming in and just being pig-headed, nasty, vindictive, whatever. And if you are to complain about it, well, you're in a small community, you wouldn't know what you're talking about. We're the ones that know best. And if you go back even to the COVID days, the same thing. You were not allowed to have an alternative view. And the same thing with the fire ants. If you have an alternative view, you are just regarded almost as the Antichrist, aren't you?
Yeah, and the ABC certainly has done a couple of hit pieces on me and Connie and Trevor and anyone that's spoken up publicly. They have totally annihilated us through incorrect and misinformation in their posts, telling everyone that we're spreading the misinformation, calling us conspiracy theorists. I was given quite a bit of airtime on ABC radio when Samford first got contaminated, and they actually, the ABC was pretty supportive in the early days, and then as soon as they realized that we were getting some traction with getting public support against the program, suddenly the narrative changed, and they said what they're dropping is not a poison. We do absolute rubbish. It is a poison because it's designed to kill. they then said, I'm an anti-vax, like Mark Ferner, who was the Minister of Agriculture at the time. He was going on the radio after I would go on, and he would say, you do realize these people are anti-vaxxers and they're spreading misinformation. And it was just soul destroying at the time. And the ABC did an absolutely awful hit piece on me where they totally lied about what I had said. I'd spoken publicly at a rally. And then the journalist Kenji Sato interviewed me afterwards, and he kept asking me, what do you think about microcephaly? I said, well, I never talked about that, but my opinion is the same chemical was put into drinking water in Brazil, where a number of babies were born with small heads, microcephaly, and the World Health Organization concluded it wasn't to do with the chemicals, it was the Zika virus, which, although there was other studies that showed it was looking like it could be pyriproxyfen. So I said, look, I don't know what caused that. And then he wrote a whole article saying that is all I talked about at this rally. And he made me look really stupid. He put, I'm not a scientist underneath. He took out the fact that I'm a chartered accountant. He didn't even mention that Dr. Connie was talking at the same event as me to back up scientifically what I was saying. They just did a total hit on me. They said I'm selling illegal signs and all. It's ridiculous. But I am actually selling no trespass signs to encourage people to make the program aware that anyone's coming on without their invitation, it is trespass. And although they say they have the right to do this under the Biosecurity Act, it's going to court next year with a couple of cases that my group is supporting financially with the legal costs. And so we've got to GoFundMe, and we sell signs to try to support those people. One of them's Trevor. The other was a lady in Samford who was arrested on her own property for trying to say no. So we are challenging their claims that they can access your property without your consent, because there is a certain area where you can have a reasonable excuse. And they seem to be ignoring that element within the Biosecurity Act, and until it goes before a judge, we're still sort of in limbo with that. But I'm telling people, put no trespass signs on your gate, make it clear you are not inviting them in, and try to keep standing up and speaking out about the nonsense of this. I mean, everybody's just so scared because the government threatens people with a $16,000 fine, and obviously they've seen these people get arrested. I mean, it doesn't need to come to that ultimately. If enough people all stood together tomorrow and said, this is just nonsense, please stop, they would have to stop. We just need the numbers. So we need as many people to watch the documentary, read a paper that Dr. Connie will probably talk about. She's done an amazing scientific peer-reviewed study. If people just read those things and watched that documentary, they would realize this whole thing needs to stop now, stop wasting our taxpayers' money, and stop poisoning our environment for no reason.
Yeah, Connie, Sarah did mention your study, and I was about to ask it. Tell us about your study, and don't hold back.
Well, it's basically, first of all, when you look at America and their experts there, they have experts that have study only fire ants, and they tell us you can't eradicate. And then you look at what happens in the environment. Like I said, there's bioaccumulation. There is it does not only affect the insects, and it does not only affect the ants as well. For example, bees don't even have to take up the bait. They just have to be near contaminated nectar to take it up. So it's being a bait doesn't mean it's only been taken up by this one species of ant. It is a broad spectrum growth regulator. That means it affects everything. So that's the first part. And then the part is that we actually did a little trial ourselves, in the sense that we had some of the baits, and we put some of the baits in a liter of water, and we wanted to see, because it's very hard, they're spraying it over land, so you can't compare that to what's out there with how much is in water. So we wanted to see that, and especially since we know that it was above the drinkable level in a deep flowing creek. So we wanted to see what happens in a liter of water. So it ends up that it's actually 3.7 micrograms per, per, hang on, I've got my numbers now mixed up. It was 3.7 micrograms per kilogram per liter, while when the creek was contaminated, it was 8 micrograms per liter. 18 micrograms per liter. So we're having this one little bait, one little corn of bait, we're getting 3.7 micrograms per liter. So, and over an area, when you spray this, there is way over 300 pieces of baits on a square meter. So you put that into a little water and in a puddle where the birds drink from, in a little pond, or even in the drinking water of the cattle troughs. So that's in the environment, and they're spraying pyroproxyfen 6 times a year. So the animals are constantly getting bombarded by this the growth regulator. So it's causing an enormous damage to the environment, and like I said before, it's affecting the water, it's affecting the soil, and basically our whole environment. You also have to consider that when farmers, they already spray, they're now forced on top of it to spray this growth regulator. There's a lot of, all of a sudden, extra insecticides going onto our food. And on top of it, many of the farmers, that is not in my paper, but there's actually a GMO product, which on organic farm, you can't have GMO products. And they have known that for quite some time before they actually know it comes out. So that means that there will be farmers that will be losing their GMO their organic status for quite some time till that goes out of the system again. So it's causing tremendous damage to the farmers. It will be ending up in our food supply, and eventually we will have some effect of that as well, because if all our food for the next 10 years is again contaminated by these growth regulators that dissolve in water and therefore can do damage to the plants as well. So, like, beyond the plants, contaminate the plants. So it is basically it's an environmental disaster.
Can I ask you, Sarah, does it worry you that besides the obvious problems with this program, that the other problems such as government overreach, breach of private property rights, bullying and arrest, communities ignored? I know you're not I don't know how long you've been out in Australia for, but your accent is not from around here, let me tell you that. But are you surprised, and are you shocked at how little or how few rights you have? And if government wants to walk over you, and if you have that alternative view, which is supported globally, by the way, but if you have that view, it doesn't go lockstep with the government, they're going to do what they can to make your life miserable. And you have little comeback. You can go to court, but it's going to cost you a fortune. Government doesn't worry about that because they have that never-ending supply of litigation. So are you shocked at where we got to in Australia at this short part of our history?
Oh, I'm horrified, absolutely horrified that on the back of COVID as well, where there was such ridiculous rules put in place to Australians. I mean, Melbourne, the most locked down city in the world. I mean, people have gone through 4 years of COVID, ridiculous rules, wearing masks. It's now all come to pass that, you know, a lot of that stuff didn't make any scientific sense. And there were people talking about it then and they got ignored. And then now they've tried to poison everyone through these vaccines that they're now showing could potentially be causing long-term issues for people. And now they want to poison our land. You know, they've poisoned our bodies and now they're poisoning our land. And I'm just normally a very quiet person. I'm a very private person. I've never had a public profile. I've never, you know, put myself out there. But as soon as that fire ant thing came in my post, in my mailbox, I just went, enough is enough. Somebody needs to stand up. I was hoping there was other, you know, organizations like Children's Health Defense or other, like the Greens or Greenpeace, or someone would be speaking up to say this environmental poisoning doesn't make any sense. Let's you know, let's campaign. But there was no one doing anything. It was literally me just constantly talking to my, you know, people in Samford. And that's when we set up the Facebook groups and started connecting. We realized there were people at the Gold Coast being hammered the same as us. So we've connected with them. We've connected with Boona, Darling Downs. We've got connections now in Gympie, Byron Bay. I've done talks around all those communities and we're all banding together because people have no rights in this country anymore. I mean, I've got children. I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and I am so worried for the health of her body. You know, these are endocrine disruptors. If you're putting it in the creek where she plays, I mean, we play in our local creeks. I mean, I told our local school that when that helicopter baited the creeks, I said, please, can you not take the children down to the creek for this week at least? Because there's poisons in the water. And like Connie said, our studies show there was 81 micrograms per litre, and the upper limit is 0.04 for pyriproxyfen to be in waterways, and it was 81. I mean, it was a significant contamination event, and we shouldn't have to live like that. But going back to the GMO as well, all those organic farmers that are not allowed to have GMO, this program has been telling them for over a year, it's S-methoprene, the other chemical, it's safe for organic farms. But they ignored that during the Samford meeting. We questioned the program. We said, what about the corn grits and the soybean oil? Aren't they GMO? And he said, and the guy said, oh yeah, it's from Cargill's in America. Well, they're all GMO products. We asked them, what about the GMO? They said they take it on notice. It took them over a year now to pull the program from these organic properties, which they've been forcing for the last year, to now say, oh, sorry, it's not organic. So we're just pausing it on organic properties. But people don't realize, and this is where I come back to the numbers, in Australia, we have something like 70% of the world's organic land in the whole world, and 40% of that organic land is here in Queensland. If you are baiting all the organic land and making it non-organic, that industry is worth something like $2.8 billion a year, and it's a fledgling growing industry. They say fire ants, if they took over the whole of Australia, will cost the economy $2 billion a year in damages to the environment. Well, what are you offsetting here? You're going to destroy an organic industry that's worth 2.8 billion to save potentially 2 billion of fire ants, and we don't even know if those 2 billions are based on these modeling from other countries. That, you know, if, like I said, tropical fire ants have been here for 200 years. Where's the $2 billion worth of damage from them? So the whole thing is just horrifying. I feel like I'm in a bad dream. I wake up every morning and I just think, when is this going to stop? They came to my property when I wasn't home, and they knew I wasn't going to be home that day because I was live streaming Trevor Hold's arrest. They snuck onto my property. They poisoned my organic fruit trees. They used pyriproxyfen, even though they said they weren't using that in Samford. I'm devastated. I feel violated. I feel not safe in my own home anymore. I've got a medical certificate. They knew about that because I seem to come out in a red rash when I'm near those baits. They did not take any of that into consideration. They've ignored me. They've maligned me in the newspaper. And I just think, I don't even want to live here anymore. And I know people actually leaving Queensland because of this program. They don't want to live here either. But I mean, I just don't know what to do unless we need people to speak up.
I just thinking you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned where you went to the Greens. Well, the Greens, I'll tell you how hypocritical, hello, they are. They've just signed this big deal, big beautiful deal, as Donald would say, for NEPA, the National Environment Protection Authority. That's going to look after the environment. Yet we have at full bore the entire top of the Great Dividing Range, as an example, 3,400 windmills, those big turbines, 260 feet tall, are being plonked in there, destroying the terrain, destroying this beautiful landscape, destroying the animals. If you look at WA, off Geograph Bay, 8,000 square kilometres will be full of wind turbines. So when we go back to the Greens are not the colour of nature, it is a colour of money. And they have as much to do with the environment as I do of flying over the moon. So there's that part there. Can you just quickly, we are running out of time, but Sarah, can you just tell us about the video? Part 1 is excellent. Tell us about part 2 and where people can actually watch this. And I was looking at it before, and we're very aware of this great film treatment by, I think it's Debbie, and it's magnificent stuff, but she does get knocked a bit by the government. We used to receive little comments on YouTube from the government, but we knew they were from the government anyway, so if they attack you, they're doing a good job. Tell us, you're doing a good job. Tell us about about this video, part 1 and part 2.
Oh, we are so grateful for Deborah Lee, who has made this film. I mean, it is just amazing. It is so factual. Everything is backed up. It basically follows all the stories with regards to the finance, with regards to how it's impacted the environment. She goes into the legal aspects. She interviews people like Dr. Connie Turney. She has Malcolm Roberts, who has taken our questions to the Senate on many occasions, and he's just totally, they just say that they don't know, they're not aware. And the video that Deborah's done has been absolutely amazing. And you can't get more information than that. So if people want to understand how crazy this whole thing is, just watch that video and that will convince you pretty quickly that the program's not got a leg to stand on. But what they do is they just keep silencing people like me and people like Dr. Connie even, and Trevor, and like you say, when you've got the Greens saying, oh, we need a fire ant program because we need to eradicate fire ants. It's like, well, you don't even know what you're talking about. It's like everyone's just brainwashed into going, we've got to get rid of these ants because they're going to kill us all. And the program even said to us, these ants, they're coming for you. They're coming for your family. They're coming for your dog. I mean, like that kind of fear tactic is just ridiculous. But the film is amazing.
And Connie, you've got 60 seconds or thereabouts, maybe a bit more. The video is very good. Do you see, tell us about the video, of course, what you think of it, but do you see us pushing through government?
No, I don't see us pushing through government. I mean, during this program, they have breached their permits so many times. They then claim the APVMA that they're in charge and they tell us it is safe. The APVMA is not independent, and they then say go back to the National Fire and Program, Eradication Program, and that's led by DPI. So you're complaining to DPI about the way they handle this. I mean, this is ridiculous. You go to the environment minister and say, well, they're destroying our environment, and you get the answer, well, if it's not totally destroyed, we won't do anything.
Yep.
So they're not listening to us, they're not listening to the science. You can scream your head off and they're just ignoring you.
Yep, and government does it well in Australia. We have an overseas panel coming up shortly on the Protagonists, and we have led the way in walking on the citizens, and we'll talk to some great guests. And in fact, Dr. Jerry Waters, he'll be up too, and he knows what government interference in normality is all about, and he's a great warrior too. Our guests have been Dr. Connie Turney, Senior Scientist and Microbiologist, and also Sarah McGuire, Fire Ant Treatment Alternatives. I do hope it gets better. I don't think it will. I don't think we have much chance against government. They're going to do what they want to do unless more people take note. Instead of saying, and we had a guest yesterday, Catherine Blakelock, said she can't believe the it'll be all right attitude, and it won't be. And that's what our governments here, state, federal and local, that's what they count on. They count on apathy as being their favourite weapon of war. Connie, Sarah, thank you very much. This has been the big issue, and coming up next, Protagonists on The World Today.
Their job is to serve us. They promise them gone, but their promises crumble with every dollar spun, and still they come with their papers, and their poisons lands are sprayed from the air. They think the forests don't feel the pain. This soil remembers every footprint and broken hearts. Stay away from my land, my children, my home. This ground is sacred. We stand here as one. No suits, no papers, no bureaucrat on a phone. We've drawn the line in the sand. Cross it once and you'll understand. Justice will prevail.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. Russian Lieutenant General Fenil Sarvarov, a senior military figure and former commander in Syria, was killed Monday morning in Moscow when an explosive device detonated under his car. Investigators are treating the case as murder committed in a socially dangerous manner and are examining potential involvement by Ukrainian military intelligence, whose operatives have carried out multiple assassinations using car bombs and targeted shootings. Sarvarov's name appeared on Ukraine's Mirat Vorets list, labeling him a Russian war criminal, and the site has already marked him liquidated. He's among the most senior Russian officers killed during the war. The attack follows a pattern of Ukrainian operations targeting Russian commanders, collaborators, and officials across Russia and occupied territories. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff described peace talks in Miami with Russian negotiator Kirill Dmitriev as productive and constructive, signaling momentum behind President Trump's Ukraine peace plan. Dmitriev met with Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and White House official Josh Grunbaum, with both sides affirming commitment to advancing a settlement. Parallel meetings also took place with the Ukrainian delegation and U.S. and EU officials, focusing on a revised 20-point framework, security guarantees, and long-term reconstruction planning. The Kremlin said Dmitriev will brief President Putin, who remains skeptical of Kiev's proposals and intends to adhere to understandings reached with Trump during their Alaska summit in August. Dmitriev signaled future talks by posting "Next Time Moscow." A survey by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism shows 61% of British Jews are considering leaving the UK, up from 50% last year, amid rising anti-Semitism. Over half say they no longer see a long-term future in the country, and 45% feel unwelcome. The poll follows the Yom Kippur terror attack in Manchester, where Syrian migrant Jihad al-Shami killed 2 people and injured 4 before being shot by police. An associate has since been charged with terror offenses. Police now say they will arrest those publicly chanting "Globalize the Intifada." Critics accuse authorities of years of weak enforcement against extremist rhetoric. The UK government pledges increased security funding and further action. Over 800 illegal boat migrants crossed the English Channel into Britain on Saturday, the highest December total since crossings began surging in 2018. Combined with last weekend's arrivals, annual crossings now total 41,455, surpassing 2024's figure and approaching 2022's record 45,755. The renewed surge underscores Prime Minister Keir Starmer's struggles to curb migration despite a one-in, one-out deal with France, which has returned only 153 people and has even seen some migrants re-enter the UK after removal. Critics, including Nigel Farage, call Starmer's approach ineffective. Farage secured French national rally support for allowing British pushbacks if their party comes to power. The UK Home Office called the numbers shameful. French President Emmanuel Macron has ordered construction of the next-generation nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to replace the Charles de Gaulle, which entered service in 2001. The decision follows a year of pressure from President Trump for Europe to assume greater responsibility for its own defense. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today. With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And thank you for joining us. This is The World Today and the Protagonists. Nice to have your company. We're going to talk about something that's, I think, is very serious, and I think it's has not been talked about enough, although our guests are very aware of it. It's the industry funding and conflicts of interest, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is otherwise known as AAP. The American Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, last week cancelled grants for the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, totaling 18 to 20, I think it says million, but I think it's actually billion, well, close to it anyway. Robert Malone from the Advisory Committee on Immunisation Practices, a US federal body, said the department had good reasons to cut the funding and listed some of the previous recommendations the organisation has made. AAP recommended and continues to recommend gender-affirming care for children, which includes medical interventions that have been halted in other countries, such as the UK, after the Cass report concluded there was no good evidence on the long-term outcomes of interventions to manage gender-related distress. The AAP also publicly opposed HHS's recent actions and released its own independent guidance on childhood immunisations, including recommendations for COVID-19 vaccination. The AAP recommends that all children aged 6 to 23 months receive a complete COVID-19 vaccine series. The Children's Health Defence, an American non-profit group mainly known for anti-vaccine advocacy, called this a necessary reboot. The CDC removed the AMA and several other major medical associations from various workshops, criticising them as special interest entities prone to bias. The organisations responded in a joint statement claiming the decision is irresponsible, dangerous to our nation's health, and will further undermine public and clinician trust in vaccines. The AAP, the major professional organisation, which represents, by the way, 67,000 paediatricians in the US, is also a lobbyist that spends, believe it or not, very, very big. The government's funding for that work comes in part from annual contributions from corporate sponsors, including vaccine manufacturers Moderna, Merck, Sanofi, and so forth. The list just goes on. Today we talk to a range of people who have held important roles in the area of the public health arena in the US, UK, and Ireland. They are doctors, public health professionals, and child health advocates. It's time to turn things on their heads, as the Americans have done, to rid the medical sector from industry capture and obvious conflicts of interest. Our guests today are Dr. Rosamond Jones, or Ros Jones, retired consultant paediatrician, Dr. Gerard Waters, suspended general practitioner but still a good guy, and Alex Platt, board chair and president of Free Now Foundation. Thank you very much for joining me. Gerard, if you could just, or Jerry, I should say, if you could just tell me, in your humble opinion, the state of play at the moment in the UK when it comes to paediatricians and pushing all sorts of pretty ugly stuff.
Yeah, first of all, I don't have a humble opinion about anything. You know, and Roz knows me well enough to know that I don't have a humble opinion. And I'm really not the one to be asking about the paediatrics in the UK. That's Roz's. Good morning, Roz. How are you? And good morning, Alex. How are you? Yeah, I'm a suspended GP because I wouldn't give the vaccine. I wouldn't go along with the COVID pathogenicity hoax. But I would say, I've never been involved in any way in the politics of medicine. I've never been on a committee. I'm a committee wrecker. I would, by my very nature, I would destroy committees because I just don't tolerate that sort of bureaucratic approach to things. But as far as Roz is the expert. Roz would agree with me, wouldn't you?
This, yeah.
Just pop in. Just pop in.
Just pop in.
I think for me, COVID was a complete eye-opener, I have to say, because it was so clearly obvious that the COVID vaccines couldn't be pronounced safe and effective. There was no time for them to have been properly assessed. And so right from the beginning, and also, of course, I was campaigning quite heavily through all the prior to the vaccine release, the COVID lockdowns, the school closures, etc., which to my mind, and the blocking of any treatments for COVID-19, even vitamin D was rubbished. And so I think that was all laying the groundwork for parents desperate to get their children back to normal. So we were campaigning against the childhood vaccines for COVID. And obviously since then, I've landed up doing a lot more reading about other vaccines, for which I have to say, in my innocence over 40 years in practice, I kind of had assumed that our regulators were doing their job properly, which clearly they were not, which will bring us to the topic of corruption, I think.
Can I ask you, Alex, your state of play at the moment, the state of play at the moment?
My state of play, I'm not totally sure what that expression means here in the United States, but I will say that there's a ton of corruption among pediatricians and at the AAP in the United States. First of all, pediatricians, from a leaked memo from Anthem Blue Cross, we found out they get paid $400 per fully vaccinated patient as long as they reach a certain percentage of patients vaccinated by the age of 2. So that's number one. Number two, we believe that pediatricians make 50% of their income from these quote unquote well baby visits where they give vaccines. That's the whole purpose of the well baby visits. But then, as it turns out, in a study that was done by Dr. James Lyons Weiler and Dr. Paul Thomas, published in 2021, the unvaccinated children see the pediatrician for fever 25 times less than the vaccinated children. So in the course of vaccinating these children, they're also causing the conditions that make the children go see the pediatrician more often. So, and today I know we're going to be talking about the withdrawal of funding for the AAP that HHS just did on December 17th.
Jerry, is there just too much industry capture at the moment, and how do we curtail it?
But you see, this is the obvious, it's very obvious there is. The problem is finding the smoking gun. The problem is finding the association. And obviously, when you've got an industry such as the pharmaceutical industry funding the likes, in Ross's case, in the sort of pediatrics groups, and in my case, the general practice groups, it's very, very hard to tie down what any money that's been transferred across is for. They will say it's for education. They will say it's for development, and it's for sort of, they will always give the impression that it's for the good of the patient, whereas in effect it's for the good of the organization. And when you talk about the organization, you're talking about the people within it. So therein lies the corruption, and that's exactly what it is. It's corruption insofar as people within organizations, and the type of people who join these get onto these committees and that, and as I say, I've never been one for committees, are the type of people who, there's two types of doctors. There's doctors who are interested and are influenced by their peers, by other doctors, and they want to be popular, and they want to be, high up the pecking order, or they want to be highly thought of by their colleagues. And then there's a group of doctors who really are not that interested in what their colleagues think of them, but what their patients think of them. And I happen to believe that the doctors who are influenced by what their patients think of them are in effect what medicine should be about, rather than those on the committees. Unfortunately, those on the committees are a different type of machine or animal, as far as I'm concerned. They, I believe, are now corrupted, generally, in the regulatory bodies. As Roz said, I believed in... I've been in business since 1971. As I said to you before, I know you find that hard to believe, but the Botox has worked remarkably well on me. I've, as I've said, you wouldn't believe how much I spent on this face. But 1971 is a long time, and like Roz, I was very, very, I went along with the whole childhood immunization scheme from when we started off with 3 injections. And then I sort of allocated that to a nurse within my practice. And probably I haven't given a childhood immunization myself over 25 years, perhaps. But as I say, I designated that. But like that, I have become very, very skeptical, but not skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry. That I was skeptical and suspicious of anyway. It's the regulatory bodies. They're the ones who betrayed us. They're the people. And as I say, the regulatory bodies, you can talk about the regulatory bodies, but it's not. It's a group of human beings. It's a group of people who are appointed to the regulatory body who actually have become corrupted, who've actually, as far as I'm concerned, have sold out the medical profession, sold out their education, sold out their family, and they sold out their patients, which is really what it's all about. And that's what it's about. You know, this idea that they were, you know, we were undermining trust in the vaccine, you know, or in the whole COVID pathogenetic scam. We were undermining it. Of course, we were undermining it. That's what our job was. Our job was to undermine anything that had no foundation, and there was no bloody foundation to it at any stage from February 2020. And I set about undermining it. I'm very proud of that. I really did. I did everything I could to undermine it from March 2020.
Yeah. Well, we certainly did everything we could to undermine the children's vaccines. And we were not successful with our regulators. I absolutely take Jerry's point. It's the regulators. For us, the paediatricians have less financial funding compared with the AAP. The Royal College here, the official funding is something like £110,000. That's, I'm sure it's an underestimate, but that compares with the College of General Practitioners, which was over 2.5 million. So the paediatricians don't get involved in vaccinations directly. It's very different from the American system. And I think the same in, I don't know, in Australia, but in the US and in Canada, if you have a child, they're registered with a paediatrician who provides primary care as well as secondary care. Whereas in the UK, you go to your GP. But we have the same, our GPs have the same funding system. It's not as much as $400, but they get paid for every vaccine they give, and they get an uplift on the whole lot if they get more than 95% uptake. And that's gone back a long time, whereas they don't get paid extra for seeing patients if they're sick. You get a capitation, you get so much per 1,000 patients, and maybe a higher amount if they're over 75, let's say. But if they're well or ill, or if you see them or you don't see them. So we're in a current situation that if you're called for a well-manned clinic, let's say, which might be to get you onto statins, so this is not vaccines, it applies to other drugs as well, then you'll get an appointment within 24 hours. But if you're ill, the same general practice, we've got examples of this from our own local general practice, you can take a fortnight to even get a video consult. So the corruption is very subtle. And with our regulators, we've got obvious 86% of our MHRA, which is like the TGA in Australia or the FDA, CDC in the States, they are pharmaceutical industry funded. And I think the same applies to all these big organizations and the European Medicines Agency. So they're funded by the people whose drugs they're going to approve. And in the UK, 99% of drug applications are approved. Now that is suggestive strongly of corruption, because you're never going to get 99% of being a really good application. There's bound to be ones that they should be saying, no, that's not good enough. You need to do more testing, this and that. And the same goes for withdrawal of drugs that have had side effects. So it takes an average of 11 years from the first highlighting of side effects before a drug is actually withdrawn in the UK. And we have this revolving door also, which is, for example, our job. We have a bit like the FDA and the CDC. We've got this split. The Medicines Healthcare Regulation Authority, the MHRA, approve a drug, but they don't advise its use. They just say, yes, it's approved. And then we have the JCVI, the Joint Committee of Vaccines and Immunisations, who say who it should be given to. And they'll design the childhood schedule, for example. But the chairman of our COVID vaccine branch, the subcommittee of the JCVI, was himself in receipt of a grant from Pfizer. A paediatrician on the JCVI is now he's the director of the Pfizer Vaccine Centre for Excellence, which was opened with great flourish in May 2021, literally a week before the MHRA approved the children's vaccine for COVID. So it's so intertwined. The journals are the same. The journals get advertising revenue, and all their printed articles are paid for by the drug companies wanting to take them out and give them to their reps to take round to the GPs, etc. And so they're corrupt. And the recently retired editors of the BMJ and the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine have all commented on the difficulty of remaining, independent when you're reviewing articles to publish, when so much of your funding is coming from the pharmaceutical industry. And it's across the board in academia too. So I have a colleague who's recently been, he's lost his job. He's an aluminium he was a professor of inorganic biochemistry, spent 30 years working in aluminium, Chris Exley. And he lost all his funding, but he managed to get private individual funding to carry on with his research. But then he had the head of his department take him on one side and say, look, guys, we've been told that we're going to lose all the funding for biomedical research at Keele University if you carry on working on aluminium, because he'd reported about Alzheimer's. And of course, aluminium is a major component in lots of vaccines. And so he, in effect, I think he left. But they said, can't you work on lead or something that we all know is poisonous? And that's fine. And he said, but no, I can't work on lead because I'm an aluminium expert. So, but it wasn't just his funding. It was all the biomedical funding for that university was going to go because of one person who was writing something that their funders did not like.
Could I ask you, Alex, the American Academy of Pediatrics, I believe they have pulled down all those photos of RFK Jr. that were all over the place. And they are not going to send him at all a Christmas card and wish him all the worst for Christmas. Can you tell us about the American Academy of Pediatrics, please?
Yeah, the American Academy of Pediatrics, it's a physicians membership association. And in 2025, they took in about $170 million in revenue. And the HHS pulled 7 grants totaling about $18 million from them. So it's about 10% of their annual revenue that was pulled. So it's not actually that much. And, even though pharmaceutical companies do fund the AAP, they're actually only 10% of the funding of the AAP. They're not as big as people think they are in terms of having a controlling interest in what the AAP does. About 40 to 50% of what the AAP takes in is actually from membership dues from the pediatricians who pay to be in the AAP. Now, what's interesting about this withdrawal of these 7 grants is that these grants were just for education on things like preventing SIDS and recognizing early autism. Now, most of us on this call right now know that those are conditions caused by vaccination. And so there's this great irony that pulling this funding is going to somehow harm children. It's going to do the exact opposite. And the funding is redundant. I mean, why can't the HHS put out talking points that are more aligned with what HHS is doing now, rather than fighting with the AAP's talking points when they're pushing out education to their physicians and their physician offices? But I want to say something about the biggest conflict of interest in medicine right now. It's that doctors somehow feel it's their duty to protect public health and to take every appointment, every medical encounter, they see that as a vaccination opportunity for people. I mean, I even know of a story of an older woman who was sitting in a chair waiting for an appointment. Someone came over to her, they lifted up her sleeve, and they put a vaccine in her deltoid muscle without her permission. I mean, they're looking for every opportunity to vaccinate people. And the thing is everybody knows that doctors are supposed to abide by the Hippocratic Oath, which is first, do no harm. Now, if the doctors think that their duty is to uphold public health at the expense of their patients' health, That is the biggest conflict of interest in medicine. And I believe that pediatricians violate that more than any other medical doctor in the entire system. And that's got to stop.
Jerry.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's funny. A problem here is terminology. And the actual terminology, public health, gives the impression that that's a redundant term. It doesn't enter into it when it comes down to vaccination. Vaccination is not about public health. It's about pharmaceutical money. It's about making money for the pharmaceutical industry. And again, I go back to the idea that we're not talking about groups of people. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about individual doctors who, in effect, you talk about the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. Incidentally, I never took the oath. Our class didn't take the oath. I don't know if Roz's class took the oath. There's a common misconception that somehow or other we stand there like we're going into a witness box and hold our hand up, take the oath. There was no oath, and the reason for that is because the oath, if you actually read through the Hippocratic Oath, it's kind of a form for an old boys club, and it's about supporting your senior colleagues and looking after their families and making it was more like a trade union where in effect it was looking after the old boys. So in effect, the concept of the Hippocratic Oath is a concept rather than a reality. And but it is first do no harm. But fundamentally, when it comes down to the term public health, it's not about public health. It's about vested interests, and it's about the pharmaceutical industry having a stranglehold on the organizations such as the ICGP and the Department of Health and the Irish Medical Council in my case. They have a stranglehold on those, and through those, take the ICGP. The ICGP, I know, gets a lot of money. I don't know what the amount of money is, but I know they get money from the pharmaceutical industry for education and for this, that, and the other. I'd say they could easily slot it into some sort of category for what they're supposedly getting it for. But at the end of the day, it's for kind of junkets away. It's for nice restaurants. It's somehow or other spread among all these things. And again, it goes back to the individuals going away. It's not an organization goes away. It's 5 guys or 10 people go away to an expensive hotel or a golfing meeting or something like that. This is fundamentally corruption on a small scale, working its way up. And
that's interesting because.
Sorry, Roz, go ahead.
No, I was going to say we've had that banned here. I mean, there was a big scandal. It's probably 30 years ago now, with a particular drug which was rolled out to rheumatologists to give to their patients, and they were all taken on the Orient Express on an amazing jolly. And this drug went from brand new to 2 million doses within the year, which is most new drugs sort of creep it in gradually. So this trip on the Orient Express was very successful. They took all the rheumatologists, really. And then it turned out it had major side effects about 3 years later, by which time, literally 100,000 people were injured by this drug. So after that, they were very, very strict. I can remember being offered a trip in a hot air balloon with an asthma company on one occasion. I didn't go, but anyway. But then they got to the point where all we were allowed to receive was like a ballpoint pen or a mouse pad for your computer, or maybe a mug. Very, very limited. If you were to go to a conference, they were only to pay expenses, and the jollies went. But having said it's coming in a more indirect way. So, like as I said, that Adam Finn, who's the professor in Bristol, who's the head of this new Pfizer Centre of Excellence, he says, "Oh, but they're not paying my salary. The university pays me," which is true. But he's got this amazing suite of laboratories. He's got grants. All of that money is all helping his department to flourish, helping him towards getting his knighthood. Whatever, it's more subtle. And the other group we haven't mentioned, which is interesting, you're talking about the Hippocratic Oath. And yes, I didn't swear it, but we have something very similar within the NHS Constitution and also our General Medical Council. If you look at their good medical practice guidelines, they are very clear that the patient is the centre of everything. They keep on saying the patient's the centre of everything, which is what Jerry was talking about. That's different from public health, which is this nebulous for the greater good. But it's interesting that the GMC get money from the Bill Gates Foundation. And you think, sorry, why? And here we are with, we've had, and Australia particularly have had problems with this, I know, with doctors losing their license to practice who've spoken out about COVID. You can rape a patient, you can have child pornography, and you get a suspension. But you speak out against the COVID vaccines and you will get your name taken off the register permanently. And that's going on. And when people say, I'm sure Jerry gets the same, why are you doing this when you've been retired for, 12 years or whatever, is because I can, and I've got nothing to lose. I think I'd be unlikely to lose my NHS pension. I'm not registered with the GMC anymore. I did re-register at the beginning of COVID because they were calling for staff to go back, and I re-registered and did an online interview. But of course, children weren't affected, so they didn't need me. So that's how I got into campaigning, because I was feeling guilty at doing nothing. But it's then about last year, and I was back on the register for 4 years, but I didn't do any clinical work. And then I've taken over a lot of medical legal work from somebody who has been struck off. And she said, please take your name off voluntarily. So I quickly took my name off again. So I'm no longer registered. So they can't deregister me because I'm not registered.
That's sorry. That's a funny. I'm in a battle at the moment with the medical council. They want me to voluntarily take my name off the register, but I won't because I don't want to decouple. I don't want to decouple. Now I'm kind of in a limbo at the moment. I'm a purgatory. Is that what we used to go to? Purgatory. It was purgatory someplace between earth and heaven and hell or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But there was some place that you went to where you were kind of half tortured, but not quite fully. So I'm in purgatory at the moment, I think, even though it's quite comfortable. And they're trying to get my name off. They want to decouple me. They want me gone. But I'm in the process of putting together a lawsuit against the medical council for the concept of tort. Tort law is the law whereby tort means damage or injury, and against the individual members of the medical council who have committed an injury against me. I can't sue the medical council, but I can sue the individuals. Well, primarily because they acted in poor faith. And it's quite simple, in 2020, when COVID was introduced, when, the COVID pathogenicity was introduced, they said it was a horrible disease. I, as a GP, saw nothing there. There was just nothing there. I examined the chest. I refused to mask. I refused to wear gloves. I refused to social distance. I refused to do any of that. I examined every patient. I'm one of the very few. In fact, I'm probably one of a handful of doctors who actually examined a COVID patient per se, a diagnosed COVID patient, because the vast majority, we were mandated to send them home unexamined. That's a fact. So 99% of COVID patients, from a GP point of view, were sent home. And by the time anybody got to examine them, they hadn't got COVID. They had what I refer to as mandated pneumonia. Yeah, they had a mandated pneumonia. They were sent home to a room to isolate. They sat around the room. You do that to anybody. In fact, you did it to any one of the four of us. If we sat around, even if we hadn't got an upper respiratory tract infection, if we hadn't got a bit of a flu or a para-influenza or picovirus or whatever we were after picking up in our travels through the world, we would have you sit any one of us down for a week or 10 days, terrified. One of us would probably get a pneumonitis, an inflammation in our lungs down onto the lung tissue. And then we get a pneumonia, and then we become short of breath, and then our lips become blue, and then we get frightened, and then we go into the hospital. So this is what they were asking, they were hearing. They were hearing about mandated pneumonia. And or that's what they were listening to. So I'm one of the few people who actually listened to a chest of a COVID patient. Now, how is the COVID being diagnosed? It was being diagnosed with a hoax, useless, corrupt PCR test, overcycled at 45 times. So, yeah, and what was I hearing? Nothing. Zip, nothing, not a sausage. I didn't hear a thing in their chests, primarily because there was nothing there. Because COVID for the first year was a psychological operation. It was about an operation of terrorizing people into. I know. And as Ron says earlier on, we GPs are the ones that get the big money, compared to the pediatrics. Do you know why? Because we're vital. We're the important ones. We're the actual ones. Sorry, Roz.
No, I know. It's all right.
Roz, can I, sorry, Roz. Alex, can I ask you? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry.
The government seems. I mean, if we go back, start of COVID, inverted commas, and then we progress through there, we would have expected now government would be saying no. It's the vaccine is not good for you. It is not safe and effective. It's sudden, unexpected. And governments have a great way of, we would say, weaseling the way out of this crisis. Tell me about, because I see Newsom, magnificent governor of California, but AB 144, that I'm just reading it before on your website, freenowfoundation.org. Tell us about that and how it will abdicate. There will be no accountability in California just about for anything.
Exactly. Thank you for asking that question about what's going on in California. California is the worst state in the entire country for vaccination rights. It is the only state where the public health department literally has a vaccine dictatorship. Not only are they in charge of a design to fail medical exemption system where literally you can't get a medical exemption. Doctors are scared to write them in California because they'll be struck off, to use your term. We don't use that here, but I know what it means. And then even if they do get an exemption written, it goes in a database that's called CARE-ME, California Immunization Registry-Medical Exemption. And that gets bumped up to the Department of Public Health, who is systematically overturning every single medical exemption that goes into that database. We colloquially call it the anti-vaxxer database for a good reason, because you don't actually want your name in that. And a doctor doesn't want their name in that either. So that's how they deny all medical exemptions, making a de facto mandate for children to go to school with more than 30 doses of vaccines. Now, the other thing that California has that makes it the unique state in terms of vaccination of this public health department vaccine dictatorship that I mentioned is that with AB 144, now our public health department is also in charge of the vaccination schedule. And AB 144 pinned our vaccination schedule to the CDC recommended schedule from January 2025. So that means even though COVID shots have been moved down from the highest level, which is CDC recommended, down to doctor-patient decision-making, California still has the COVID shots on their schedule. And we're very worried about that in particular because Susan Monterez, who was the head of the CDC for just a little bit, maybe a minute, and was fired by Kennedy, has been moved to California to help with our vaccination program. So we're very scared she's going to add COVID shots to the children's schedule for school attendance here in California. So again, California is the only state where the public health department decides whether or not your child has a legitimate medical exemption, and they're now deciding the vaccination schedule for all California children, and it's absolutely frightening. The other frightening part of AB 144 is they absolved everyone in the entire vaccination process from liability. So if you order a vaccine, if you prescribe a vaccine, if you administer a vaccine, you have no liability at all. And that's a big problem because it also says even in cases of omission. So that would obliterate the need for true informed consent if they have no liability in the case of omission. And informed consent is a very interesting topic here that I think a lot of people need to know about. I don't think that's the actual correct term. That's the term that's used. But I think the correct term is informed choice, because what is the point of being informed if you have to consent afterwards? You're going to be informed you could get myocarditis from the COVID shots, but you have to consent after? No, the term should be informed choice. And I want everyone to know that in 1972 in the United States, there was a case called Canterbury, which changed the standard for informed consent to a patient-centered standard. And it was affirmed by a case called Cobbs in the Supreme Court in California in that very same year. And by patient-centered, both those cases say that it has to be what a reasonable patient would need to know about any material risks of a procedure they're about to go through. It's not those cute pastel-colored VIS, vaccine information statement sheets, that you get handed or you're supposed to be handed before you get a vaccine. Those are required by law to satisfy informed consent. That's not informed consent because 63% of the conditions on those VIS sheets are mild and self-limiting conditions, not the material, serious conditions and serious conditions like death that could occur. That entire sheet should be only the material conditions that could happen after you get a vaccine. So I want everybody to know that the standard for informed consent in California and the United States was set in 1972, and it's what a reasonable patient should know about a procedure before they decide to do it or not.
It's exactly the same in the UK. We had a case law which said that you must tell the patient everything which they could reasonably want to know, which includes all serious risks, however rare. And you also have to tell them alternatives to any treatment. This would be the same for surgery or whatever medicine, that you must tell them what the alternatives are and what would happen if they'd have no treatment at all, or no vaccination in this case. Alex, I'd be really interested to know if you then still say you don't want your child vaccinated in California, you presumably can't access state education, but is there any other penalty? And the reason I ask that is in Hungary now, which is interesting because they generally, Eastern Europe seems to have been more skeptical and pushing back than Western European countries, but Hungary has compulsory vaccination. And if within 2 months of reaching the date for your schedule to start, you've not had any vaccines, the child will be taken into care. It's as simple as that. And here in the UK, I have to say, I've been involved in some cases recently, very worrying medical legal cases where, you know, a couple with a very, very preterm babies, twins, 24-week birth, 16 weeks early, and they wanted to have the vaccines delayed till they were 2 months post-term. But of course, at the date when they reached the 2 months of age, they were still in hospital. They were still weeks before their due date. And the vaccines were being recommended to have in hospital at 2 months of age. And, in Denmark, they're still giving them at 3, 6, and 12 months, where here we give them at 2, 3, and 4. So are the Danish anti-vax? I don't know. But this couple ended up with these children being taken into care. And I just, really, really shocking. And 3 years later, they're still fighting to try and get the kids back.
You're asking some great questions. And I used to like the president of Hungary, but that gives me great pause that the children would be taken if they weren't vaccinated. So in California and all across the United States, the most scary time is right after a woman gives birth in the hospital, because they try to give your child a birth dose of hepatitis B vaccine and often the vitamin K shot, which is also not just a vitamin. It has some toxins in it also. But the scary thing is, if you say no, and if you oppose that Hep B vaccine too strongly in the hospital, they will threaten you with CPS. And it's a very, very scary time. Now, in California, there are not really any official options. If you don't want to get your child even one vaccine, then your child cannot go to school in California. However, we've been working with a group called frontlinehealthadvocates.com. And it's a group of doctors and lawyers, and they evaluate patients under the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a federal law, so that trumps state law, and it is outside of the CARE-ME anti-vaxxer database system. And so about half of our private schools in California are taking the ADA waiver, and we actually have a lawsuit at Free Now Foundation that we just filed a few weeks ago to compel all schools to accept the ADA waiver for children who qualify for an ADA disability. There's also someone named Greg Glazer who has a form on his website for a religious exemption, which is not allowed in California either. However, some religious schools are taking those. Outside of that, if your child has learning disabilities, which are usually caused by vaccination, they get something called an IEP, an individualized education program. That is the one carve out in public school where your children do not have to have vaccinations and they do not need a medical exemption for that. Otherwise, Your only choices in California are to leave the state, which is not an in California choice, obviously, or to homeschool, which is highly disruptive because most parents in California have to have both parents working to support a family here because it's very expensive in this state. So the options here are really not very good at all, and I'm glad you've asked about that.
Alex, could you just quickly just fill us in? You used to work for Apple, by the way. We use nothing else but Apple products because it doesn't break down. But you are very lucky to be here now. Is that tell us about what happened, if you wouldn't mind,
Sure.
in public, and also is that one of the driving forces? Because you're not just talking about someone else's experience, you are talking about your own.
That's right. Thanks for asking about that. When I was 29, this is 30 years ago, I was running a worldwide group for Apple Computer. And my family called and asked me if I wanted to go on a vacation to Bali. And so I said yes. And I thought, oh, I need to go to travel medicine and get vaccines. And I didn't know what I know now. So I rolled up my sleeve. I got 6 vaccines and I became physically disabled for the next 6 months. But it got worse. The 7th month, the brain damage set in and I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't do math anymore. I could barely remember anything anybody told me in that period. I spent the next 3 years 80% housebound, and I still have symptoms today that I am fighting from that vaccine injury 30 years ago. It is not a cakewalk at all. In fact, at the worst moments, I would describe what I've been through as a living death. It's been absolute torture.
It is terrible, isn't it, Jerry? And as a GP, suspended one, but fantastic Botox. But I mean, and you're looking ever so gorgeous. You asked before, how much would that have cost you? I would probably say about $2-3. Anyway, looking at the
It's cost me a whole lot of money. I've spent an average of $50,000 per year out of pocket on my recovery, and so I'm up at $1.5 million spent out of pocket for my recovery. You don't spend that kind of money unless you have to.
Well,
if we were to have a solution, I was going to say the simple thing would be to stop the indemnity for the drug companies. If you buy a car and the brakes fail, you sue the motor car manufacturer. Why have we ever done this? We did it because the vaccine industry, right back, it was when Ronald Reagan, I think, was in charge, and the vaccine companies had so many lawsuits against them for vaccine injury that they started going out of saying, we're not going to make vaccines, they're too risky. Because you're giving them to all these healthy population. It's very different from drugs where you've got a patient in front of you with an illness and you're balancing the risks of the disease against the risk of the drug you might give. But this, need a much higher bar, and they couldn't meet it, and they were pulling out, and they were realizing that they'd got items on the vaccination schedule for which they'd got no manufacturer potentially. So Ronald Reagan said, oh, tell you what, we'll take the liability. And so since then, and then we've done the same here, we have a vaccine damage payment scheme, but they're woefully inadequate, and also they're paid by us lot. We, the taxpayer, are having to foot the bill for the damage caused by the drug industry. And if they had to fit their own bill, this would be an incentive for improved drug safety. But if they have this whole schedule, and it's terribly lucrative because you're giving it to millions and millions of people. It's not like a rare drug. It's something you're going to give right across the board, guaranteed income, particularly if it's mandated in California. How much money are the drug companies making from all these shots? And yet any child who's harmed can't go near them at all. And that would be very simple, actually, to change, to simply cancel the PrEP Act and the various legislation that has given them indemnity.
Yeah, well, they make about $50 billion per year in total, all the vaccine companies, before COVID shots rolled out. And then they make about $500 billion selling us the quote unquote cures for the conditions they cause.
Can I ask you, Jerry, and by the way, Alex, I wasn't referring to you with the $3 worth of medical procedures on your face.
He was talking about my face.
His face.
I thought you were talking about how much I spent on my vaccine injury. Totally missed it.
And that leads me, though, to the next question, Jerry. 1.5 million US, so that's probably 1.2 million pounds in the UK. Now, if you multiply that by how many thousand? Economically speaking, it was a disaster because it destroyed the economy. It cost a bundle, if you're looking at Alex's example. And all in all, it was a terrible, terrible time and a terrible, terrible decision by governments around the world. Tell me this, Jerry, why are they still pushing, knowing full well that the damage they created, there's in many cases there's just no coming back.
Yeah, but it comes down to it's all about money. It's fundamentally that is the basis of all decisions in the world, not just in relation to medicine, but it's all about money. It's all about who's making the money, and the problem primarily, as in the sort of telecommunications and that, there's just billions and billions to be made out of, initially out of telecommunications. And a lot of those people, like, these moguls have gone into the pharmaceutical industry to make more money. And the problem is a billion is 1,000 million. And that sort of money can be used as bribes. A million, I don't know about the rest of you, but a million would make a difference to my life. And if you've got a billion, you've got 1,000 million to bribe people, to lever people, to lever organizations, and that's fundamentally where it comes from. So, we talk about the liability of the pharmaceutical industry. Of course, that would be the very, very simple solution. Remove the liability. That if you do, who was it? Ralph Nader back in 40 years ago was down on the motor car industry in America. And he used to talk about the dangers in motor cars. And very, very quickly, any problems with motor cars, and very, very quickly, the industry changed when, you had to take responsibility. And that's fundamentally, it's as simple as that. And as you say, if you're making large amounts of money out of each individual patient, and you've got millions or billions of them, and remember, a lot of this sort of rubbish doesn't only go on in the Western world. It goes on in the Eastern world, where you between China and India, you've got 2.5 billion people. There's such massive amounts of money, so much so they can afford to buy off the organizations like the medical councils and that in the various different countries. They're the people, they're the jackboots who are then used to put on the throat of somebody like me.
I think it's not just money, is it? It's the power that money brings. Because if you're yes, but it's subtly different, isn't it? Because if you're a billionaire, does earning another billion give you anything personally? Does it make you happier? No. But it gives you power. And that's what people are so reluctant to lose and relinquish power. And also this absolute inability to ever say when you got something wrong. And we've seen it, I think, there have been so many scandals over the years where we've recently just started compensation for a blood contamination scandal that's from 50 years ago. And most of the people who got the injuries with, HIV, Hep C, etc., from contaminated blood products, many of them have already died before they've seen any compensation. And I think you'll see that, we had the same with the post office scandal, all sorts of high-tech scandals. And it's this same thing that everybody closed ranks and they will not admit they were wrong. And you were asking, Mike, when's it going to stop? Why? I mean, AstraZeneca, which was hailed in Britain, we had the first, vaccine, UK vaccine come to market, and we were frightfully proud of ourselves. But that was causing damage and death within weeks in Denmark. After one death, they'd suspended AstraZeneca. But we by then had 50 deaths and were still carrying on saying, but we've given, millions of doses, it's not a problem. And we were still starting a children's trial the week after the first adult, 30-year-old had died from an AstraZeneca injury. But it just got quietly dropped. 6 months later, you've had your original AstraZeneca. When you went for a booster in the autumn of 2021, it was Pfizer, because AstraZeneca we don't have any today, was the answer. But they won't say. And now it's got withdrawn internationally, and we're told it's for commercial reasons. But it's clearly because it was causing huge injury. But then why is nobody talking about the injuries caused by Pfizer or Moderna? They're not.
Yeah. Can I ask you, as we wrap this up, Ros, where to now? Where to from here?
Ooh, well, I think the main thing is that we've just got to keep pushing on this, because these vaccines, they're being rolled out, the technology was fundamentally very different. And I'm not saying that other vaccines aren't damaging, but I think the mRNA was in a different ballpark altogether. And they're trying to swap all the existing vaccines over to mRNA technology over the next few years. So this is not about COVID, it's an ongoing threat.
And Jerry, where to from here?
Well, what I'd like to do is make sure that the whole COVID catastrophe, which I refer to as the greatest crime in human history, bar none, it's very important that it's not seen as a road bump. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to try and make it look like just a bump on the road. And that is why I am continuing to fight. I will continue to fight, because it's just something that I believe. I also believe that it is perhaps the genesis and the nexus from which we can actually bring out genuine changes. If there's anything possibly could be said good about the whole COVID hoax, and that's that it brought skepticism into people. There are now more people talking about it. It's brought down, it's collapsing a number of the sacred cows, like climate change and rubbish like that. It's bringing a lot to, it's making people skeptical, it's making people question, and if for no other reason, that's good. Not that I would sacrifice the presence of the COVID scam against what's going on, but at the end of the day, that's the only good thing that COVID did, and that was to make us all skeptical, make us question, and people are waking up. They're slow, they're very, very slow, but they are waking up. I know that because I'm on the cold face. I have been on the cold face for 40 years. I know I'm there. I know it's happening, and I'm generally positive about it. But there again, I'm a positive person. I've got an expectation of winning, generally because I do.
Alex, where to from here?
Where to from here? Two things. Watch the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices in the United States. They are motioning that they're going to be moving the shots all down from CDC recommended, which is the highest level, down to doctor-patient decision-making, which would mean that they would not be mandatable except in states like California, which I call Absurdistan, that has its own vaccination standard, unfortunately. And also, look at the legal work going on, like at my nonprofit, Free Now Foundation. We have a lawsuit that could end mandates. It's a due process lawsuit alleging 5 violations of due process and now more because of AB 144. We have a lawsuit to expand exemptions to include an ADA waiver. And we're just about to add another lawsuit to stop the practice of hospital homicide. So legal work today is going to solve our problems today for children. But think about the future if we're in a social credit score society with digital ID. And if it's illegal to mandate vaccines because we have wins in court today, then we're never going to have a binary social credit score again like we did when we were locked down with COVID. And by binary, I mean you had a vaccine, you could do things. You didn't have a COVID shot, you couldn't do things. It can never be binary again if it's illegal to mandate vaccines. So it's really important to cement those rights with durable decisions in courts today.
Just quickly, Alex, before we get off, tell us about FreeNowFoundation.org.
Thank you. Yeah, we used to be called the Children's Health Defense California chapter, and about 2.5 years ago we rebranded as Free Now Foundation, and we are California's leading medical freedom law nonprofit, and we're looking for support so we can end our year strong and kick off 2026 even stronger. We're doing great.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Jerry Waters, I would visit your guy supplying the Botox and ask for your money back, but thank you anyway for joining us. Loved your conversation. And of course, Ros Jones, retired consultant paediatrician. Thank you so much for your time. Christmas is not far away. May you all have a great Christmas. And in this country, we can't really say Merry Christmas, but I am. Have a Merry Christmas and a safe and prosperous New Year. And thank you for your support. This has been The Protagonists, and this is The World Today.